My name's Matt. I joined the Army in 1995. Spent 13 years in the Army and did a number of operational tours. The last one being Iraq in 2003. Left in 2008 and then joined an emergency service that I've been serving in for the last 14 or coming up to 15 years now. And yeah, I came to PTSD Resolution as a result of a number of issues that have kind of come to the fore over the last 12 months. Ultimately, the catalyst was a breakdown in a really abusive relationship, and what that led to was kind of an opening of the floodgates for 27 years of armed forces and emergency service experience, where over those 27 years the things that were left unresolved, as well as some things from my childhood. So it was that last event, that abusive relationship, and the sort of circumstances around that breaking down that led to what was probably a minor mental breakdown for me. And that's kind of what I then came to PTSD Resolution to try and resolve. The breakdown of the relationship was November 2021. And the referral, I think, was made sort of early 2022, so it would have been about a year ago now. The emergency service that I'm currently employed by, they've signed up to the Armed Forces Covenant and they work directly with Project Nova. The irony was that I was one of the points of contact for Project Nova, and I'd referred plenty of people through to Project Nova for assistance, and Project Nova were this one-stop shop for everything all veteran related. And as a result of my situation and the reason that I came to be suffering with my mental health, I actually spoke to one of my welfare contacts at work, and he'd suggested, do you want to get referred through to Project Nova yourself? So I gave him consent for that, and that as a result meant that Project Nova got in touch with me, and then they referred me on to PTSD Resolution. A friend of mine, a work colleague, committed suicide in 2019, and the circumstances around that were sort of quite traumatic, and what I found really confusing was the fact that I had a real dip in my mental health at that stage, despite the fact that I didn't really know him that well, and I found it really confusing. I'm quite a curious sort of analytical person anyway, and I found it really strange that I suffered a genuine, palpable sort of decline in my mental health as a result of somebody who I loosely knew committing suicide, whereas in the past I'd had family members commit suicide, I'd had family members die in sudden violent circumstances which didn't cause me the same level of mental stress. So as a result of that, I got referred to a person-centred counselling approach, which I found helpful at the time, but I didn't realistically find it to give me any long-term sort of tools to deal with recurrences. And in November 2021, all my world came crashing down, and it just opened the floodgates to all of it, and it made me realise that actually what was probably the start of the floodgates open was back in 2019. I just left it unresolved for 2 years. I started becoming really hypervigilant, which I found quite strange, because as much as I'd been operationally deployable at work and involved in some violent situations at work, I never felt that since 2019 I was particularly hypervigilant. I was always careful, always wearing my own personal safety, but sort of from 2019 I became really hypervigilant. I'd started having thoughts about some of the previous operational tours that I'd not had for a number of years. The last operational tour I had was 2003 in Iraq, and for a number of years I had no issues whatsoever, despite some of the things that happened on that tour. And after that event in 2019, I started thinking about those again, and it became more and more intrusive, and they started affecting sleep. And like I said, then in 2021 it was almost like there'd been this steady trickle through these gates, and then in 2021 everything opened up, and then at that point I was having panic attacks. I was suffering with some really bad sort of paranoia and hypervigilance. Even just going to the supermarket and finding it a struggle just to go around and get the most basic of things, crowded situations, really depressive, dark, suicidal thoughts at one point. I've always considered myself to be quite a calm and rational person, And for the first time in my life, I suffered from some real sort of genuine anxiety. And that obviously led on to those panic attacks. And yeah, it just made even getting up in the morning really, really difficult. So the combination of the depression, the anxiety, and what potentially could have been symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder as well, all kind of combined and created the perfect storm. I'm conscious not to sort of criticise a previous approach that I've had. As much as the person-centred approach was beneficial at that time, like I said, I don't really feel that I had any long-term strategies going forward. It was very much kind of like a sounding board. The difference between now and back then was that in 2021, after the relationship breakdown, I found a number of different friends had kind of come to the fore, and I'd got that sounding board, so I didn't need that in a counsellor, didn't need that in a therapist. What I needed was some strategies to move forward, and I needed some genuine work on some of these traumas, and that's what I found different. So when I came to see you after PTSD Resolution got involved, there are a number of different techniques and another number of different strategies that we discussed about moving forward, about when triggers were inevitably going to occur, what I could then do as a result, and then some proactive work. The rewind technique we can talk about in more detail, I'm sure, but that was just like a complete epiphany for me. The 2 rewinds that we did about the holistic trauma, and then one specifically about the catalyst in 2021, were just the things that absolutely floored me physically and mentally. It was just one of those things that as soon as I'd done it, it was almost like this palpable weight got lifted off my shoulders, and it just felt much more distant and much more. It just felt easier to cope with. It was still there. The trauma was still there. I could still picture it. I could still talk about it, but I could talk about it with almost like a distance, like it'd been put in the past almost. Whereas before that, I could never do that. Even just talking about it and raising it as an issue, I'd break down into floods of tears and start panicking. And so yeah, that was a massive thing. I just found that the resilience that I've got now to unfortunate life events has returned, and actually it's probably got better. So whereas before, as a young sort of carefree soldier, no responsibility really, no family, no house to pay for, nothing like that, I felt that I was quite robust and quite resilient. But actually I'd got life experience, but I'd not got the real life responsibility that comes with being a mid-40s bloke with all these other things to be contending with. And actually what I've found now is that I've got strategies in place. The techniques that you employed on me really gave me an opportunity to sort of put that in the past, not to forget it, but just to sort of draw a line under it. So now I'm almost like starting without all the baggage from 1995 to 2021, and I'm kind of being able to run my own race without all this weight on my back, and that's how it feels. And that's all come from the techniques that we've done and the discussions that we've had around coping strategies and various other bits of stuff. And how you've kind of encouraged me to be reflective about what works for me and what doesn't, and being non-judgmental when it comes to me suggesting things that are a little bit off the wall, or me kind of rejecting certain suggestions that you've made as a result of trying them before or not feeling that they'd work. Yeah, back at work full time. It's a different pattern that I'm working with, it's a different role that I'm working in, but it's something that I'm back with. There was sort of a real resentment around work, and I can't say in all honesty that it's not still there, but the fact is that I am back at work. It's something that I would have never been fit for if it would not for the but for the fact that I've obviously been through this process. I honestly don't think that I probably would have ever returned if it were not for the fact that I'd obviously had this sort of intervention. And yeah, there's probably a strong possibility I probably wouldn't have even been here anyway if I didn't. So yeah, it's allowed me to go back to work, and now that part of my life is effectively sort of put to one side, and I don't need to worry about that, and that's something that I can park for the time being. It's just made me it's allowed me to be able to sort of focus my energies in different directions. It almost feels like I almost had the same amount of things to deal with at the end of our sessions as I had at the beginning. because I actually didn't go back to work, did I, until we'd finished our sessions. Even though the notification came through, but we were in the process sort of discharging me as a patient prior to that sort of finalisation with work and going back. So again, reflecting on that, it clearly shows to me, and it's evident, that even though the situation was the same, realistically, albeit the fact that it would be moving forward and progressing, I came to you and was discharged from you with the same sort of situational environment that I had all the way through, which means that the only control measure is what had actually happened during those sessions and the things that sort of we discussed and how I employed them afterwards. And then since I've been back to work, I've kind of felt like I've gone from strength to strength. But I was really sceptical, I'll be honest. I'd been through therapy 3 times in my life prior to coming to PTSD Resolution, and I couldn't honestly say that any of those approaches that I'd had before were of any benefit long term. But this really did work for me, and I've been singing its praises for a number of weeks and months now, and I've recommended a number of people to sort of get in touch. So yeah, it's genuinely saved my life.